All right, get this. Disney World, a hurricane, and a $10 peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Sounds like the start of a joke, right? But this actually happened in the story. Well, it goes way deeper than you might think. Today, we're diving into this fascinating article from the Daily Beast. It captures not just the event itself, but like the whole social media frenzy that kind of blew up around it. So imagine this. Hurricane Milton decides to crash Florida's party. Disney World goes into lockdown mode, and stranded guests are met with a $10 PB&J. Now, this isn't just about an overpriced sandwich, right? It gets us thinking. What happens when a corporation, especially one known for its, well, magic, and let's be honest, premium pricing, suddenly has to deal with a real-world crisis? Let's dig in. So picture this. You're stuck in Disney World, hurricane raging outside, you're hungry, the usual spots are closed, and then you see it. A PB&J kit going for a cool $10. The Daily Beast described it as like a loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, a jar of jelly, and some utensils. Not exactly a gourmet meal.
Right. And what's fascinating here is how this seemingly small detail, the price of a PB&J, becomes this like symbol, a lightning rod for much larger discussions. I mean, for some people on social media, it was a clear example of corporate greed, right? Like taking advantage of a vulnerable population. Others saw it as, well, a matter of supply and demand during an emergency. You're paying for the convenience, not necessarily the ingredients themselves.
Yeah, it really reveals this fundamental tension, doesn't it? On one hand, you have the expectation that, especially at Disney World, you're going to pay a premium for just about everything. But in a state of emergency, does that calculus change? Does I don't know, the responsibility of a corporation like Disney, does it shift when it becomes responsible for the safety and well-being of thousands of guests, riding out a hurricane?
And that's where the discussion of corporate responsibility gets really interesting, especially in the context of a place like Disney World. It's not just a theme park, it's an escape, right?
Yeah.
This meticulously crafted world. So when a hurricane throws a wrench into that carefully constructed reality, well, it disrupts the narrative in a very powerful way.
For sure. And, the article doesn't go into great detail about all the logistical challenges Disney must have faced, right? Staffing shortages, supply chain disruptions, safety concerns. You can imagine. And in the middle of it all, they're trying to maintain some semblance of that Disney magic. Did they succeed? Well, that probably depends on who you ask, I guess. But they did manage to avoid a complete PR meltdown, even with social media, buzzing.
And that's another layer to this whole thing. The role of social media in shaping how we perceive and experience these events.
Absolutely. And speaking of social media, the Daily Beast highlights one guest in particular, a self-proclaimed Disney mama. She documented her entire hurricane experience on TikTok. We see the wind whipping through the trees, cast members in costumes still trying to entertain guests. It's almost surreal, this juxtaposition of a manufactured sense of normalcy against the backdrop of a very real storm.
What's fascinating about Disney Mama and others like her is they become these citizen journalists, offering this raw, unfiltered perspective that traditional media often can't capture in real time.
It's true. It's like having a direct line into someone's lived experience, And in this case, Disney Mama's TikToks, they went viral, becoming like a primary source of information for many people following the hurricane. But it also highlights this interesting shift in power dynamics, right? It's not just news outlets controlling the narrative anymore.
Absolutely. Anyone with a smartphone can potentially shape public perception of an event. For better or worse, think about it. You're scrolling through your feed, and suddenly you're seeing videos of a hurricane-battered Disney World, not from a news crew, but from someone who could be your neighbor, your friend.
Right. It definitely adds a layer of immediacy and perhaps even trust, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
After all, this is someone who's actually living through the experience, not just reporting on it from a distance.
Precisely. But on the flip side, it also raises questions about the spread of misinformation, right? How do we, as consumers of this constant stream of information, how do we determine what's credible and what's not? It's a critical skill in today's world, especially when emotions are running high during a crisis.
That's a really good point. And speaking of emotions running high, the Daily Beast article also mentioned how Disney Mama felt safer staying at one of the deluxe resorts during the hurricane. She even, implied that guests in those higher-priced accommodations might have received, preferential treatment.
It's a subtle detail, but it speaks volumes about the complexities of this situation and about society in general, right?
Yeah.
Because even in a crisis, existing social structures and inequalities, they don't just disappear. In some cases, they might even become magnified. Think about it. Access to resources, information, even a sense of security that a system, they're not always evenly distributed.
It's a sobering thought for sure, and it makes you wonder if you were in Disney Mama's shoes facing a hurricane, anxiety's high, would your perception of that $10 PB&J be different depending on, I don't know, where you were staying, what resources you had access to?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's easy to judge from afar, but being in that moment, facing that uncertainty, it likely shifts your perspective. Would you focus on the price tag or the relief of having something, anything, to feed your family? These are the questions that this story, I think, makes us confront, even if we've never set foot in Disney World.
Exactly. And while we're talking about perspectives, it's important to remember the bigger picture here, because while this PB&J was causing a stir online, Hurricane Milton was a real-world event with very real consequences.
Absolutely. The Daily Beast article mentions 9 fatalities and millions without power across Florida. This wasn't just a rainy day at the Magic Kingdom. It was a powerful storm that impacted countless lives.
It really puts things in perspective, doesn't it? I mean, it makes you think about, well, the ethics of vacationing in a hurricane-prone area in the first place, right?
Yeah, it's a complex issue, no doubt. It's easy to, pass judgment from a distance. But put yourself in that position, right?
Yeah.
You've planned and saved for this Disney trip, maybe for years, then bam, a hurricane warning throws everything into disarray. Do you try to evacuate, facing potential gridlock and uncertainty? Or do you trust Disney to keep you safe, even if it means riding out the storm with, well, a $10 PB&J?
Right, right. It's a tough call, for sure. And this whole situation from the PB&J to Disney Mama's TikToks, it kind of becomes a Rorschach test, don't you think, for how we view like risk, responsibility, and even our expectations of, a corporation like Disney. What does it mean to deliver that magic when Mother Nature throws a curveball?
It's a good question. I think what we see here is that there are human stories behind every headline. Layers of complexity beneath even the, seemingly silliest viral moments. And in an age where information and, let's be honest, misinformation spreads at lightning speed, it becomes even more important to look beyond the surface, to ask questions, and to engage in thoughtful discussion, I think.
Couldn't agree more. So the next time you find yourself, scrolling through social media, remember the $10 PB&J. It's a reminder that there's always more to the story than meets the eye. This is The Deep Dive, reminding you to look beyond the surface and dive deeper into the complexities of our world. Until next time, keep asking questions and stay curious.